Nora Moon does everything right. She leaves home, builds a life, marries. 3 times, decades apart. She picks the life she's building over the one she could have had, and she keeps it. But some part of her never left the other one. This is the part nobody warns you about. Becoming someone new is not one clean switch you flip. It's a handful of separate changes, each moving at its own speed, and the slowest one can trail years behind the rest. So you can rebuild almost everything about who you are and still be left with one piece that never caught up. For Nora, that piece was the feeling. The one still tied to a goodbye she never finished saying. So why does a name she hasn't spoken out loud in years still lands like a punch? Why does the quiet she fought so hard for hold for a decade and then cracked in a single afternoon? That's what makes her worth your time. She did everything right, kept all of it, and still carries one part that never moved, which makes her the clearest version of something already running in you, quietly, whether or not you've ever looked straight at it. And the cost of missing it is paid in years. You wait for the feeling to fade, or you decide it already has, and it does neither, because it was never keeping your clock. So once you can see it, your own silence stops sounding like proof it's over. It starts sounding like something unfinished, something that was never going to close just because you stopped talking about it. It keeps its own clock, not yours. Forget Nora for a minute. Take the person out of it completely and look at just the machine underneath. Because the machine was never hers. It's how anyone becomes someone new. And it's running in you while you watch. Picture a garden you decided to remake. You knew what you wanted it to be now. So you cleared the beds and you planted with intent. The annuals went in this spring, and within weeks they answered. Fast color, right where you asked for it. The perennials took their time, a season or two to settle into the new arrangement, and they got there. And near the back, there is a tree that was planted for the garden that stood here long before you ever drew a plan. It's healthy. It's doing, with total competence, exactly what a tree like it does. It grows slowly, and it leans toward the light it has always known. The light that used to fall on this spot and falls somewhere else now. Nothing is wrong with that tree. That's the part that fools you. Walk the garden one plant at a time and you won't find a problem anywhere. Because there isn't one in any single plant. The annuals are thriving. The perennials are right where they should be. The tree is, by every measure you could put it, in beautiful health. Each bed passes its own inspection. The only way to see the thing that's off is to stop checking plants one by one and read the whole garden against the plant you actually hold now. And notice that one living, flourishing thing is still keeping faith with a garden you have otherwise left behind. And you can't argue it out of that. A tree doesn't grow faster or turn toward new light because you have changed your mind. It moves on the order of years, on a clock set long before you started, and it answers to that clock and no other. And that's not only the garden, it is you, built on these same separate clocks, with one part rooted deep enough to keep faith with a life you've otherwise left. So pick one. One thing you do that points exactly where you say you want your life to go. Fully chosen. Nothing wrong with it. That still costs you more than the task could ever explain. Every single time. For a reason you've never quite been able to name. Sit with that one for a second. That extra cost isn't the task. It's the one part of you still leaning toward a life you walked away from. So when you watch Nora, do not watch the big choices. She gets those right every time. And that's exactly why they are the wrong place to look. Watch for the subtle register underneath them. Watch the moments where her life and her words line up perfectly and something below them is still leaning somewhere else. Watch for the one corner of the garden she's tended around for 20 years. The one still keeping faith with a garden she left at 12. Go back to the tree in the back corner. Healthy, growing slowly, leaning toward a light that used to fall there and falls somewhere else now. And watch it get planted. Before any of the big choices, there was a long stretch where Nora didn't have a slow corner at all. Every part of her wanted the same thing. She knew what she was after. She was going to be a writer. She was going to win the biggest prize there is. And she said so out loud, like it was already settled. Who she was aligned perfectly. She hated to lose. One time, she came home angry over second place in a school competition. And what she felt lined up with the rest. Her family, and the boy she walked home with every day. The one she told her own mother she was going to marry. Everything pointed the same way. Not perfectly. She is a kid. The feeling part already runs a little behind. She cries easily and sulks when the day doesn't go her way. Close enough, though. One plan, one life, one place, one person. One thing to watch, and only this. When she leaves, Watch which part of her doesn't get to finish. The day is decided. She's leaving. She's in class, and she gives the other kids a reason. She says she's going because she wants to. She says that in Korea, you cannot win that prize anyway. She says it a little too cleanly, like she practiced in the mirror. And it isn't really true, because nobody asked for her permission, and staying was never on the table. This way, it's easier to cope with the decision. After school, they walk home like they have done 1,000 times. This time, neither of them says a word the whole way. They get to the spot where the path splits. His goes left, her goes up a stairs on the right. She starts up the steps. He decided to keep walking, and that's almost how it ends. But then he stops.
야,
왜?
잘 가라.
So he goes left, she goes up, and they don't see each other again for 24 years. Two kids who grew up side by side, and the whole goodbye is one word each. The rest of it never got said. Look at what the move took care of and what it left hanging. Nora didn't choose to leave Korea. Her parents did. Nevertheless, she agreed. And even if she had not, there is nothing a 12 years old can do to stop her family from moving across the world. The leaving just happened to her, and two parts of her had no problem with it. Her ambition was fine. The bigger stage she wanted was out there, not in the town she was leaving. The person she was becoming was fine too. She'd adapt. She'd learned the language. She'd remake herself. And she did exactly that. For those two parts, getting on the plane was nothing. The part that got left hanging was the smallest one in the frame, the goodbye. It needed a few real sentences and got one word. She never finished it. That's the tree getting planted. The light she grew up under, the city, her family, her friend, the whole world she had spent her childhood leaning toward. That light just moved. And the part of her rooted in it keeps growing toward where the light used to be. The way the tree does. Everything around her changed at once, and that one part stayed leaned the old way. For Nora, the slow part turned out to be the feeling, and it stayed that lean for a long time. You can watch it get worse before it settles. A girl standing alone at break time in a country where she doesn't speak the language yet and doesn't know a soul. But with time, you watch it go quiet. She learns the words. She makes friends. She becomes exactly who she set out to be. and that leaning corner stops being anything anyone will notice. It didn't close, it just went quiet, and it stayed quiet for years. Think of the one you undersay, not the big dramatic exit, the quiet one. The friend you stopped talking to without a single fight. The place you left for a good reason. The person who was right there and then one day just wasn't. And the goodbye that should have taken an hour took a sentence because you had a flight to catch, or a lease to sign, or a feeling that was never going to fit in the time you had. You handled the move. Every part of it got done. But the thing you didn't say is still sitting there. It doesn't expire. You figured the quiet that came after was the sound of it closing up. And for years, that was enough. And you were right to think you'd move on. By every test you knew you had. Then something brings the memories back. And it's all still right there. That's when you find out quiet was never the same as dawn. What you just felt, that is all still right there, is not something wrong with you, any more than it was something wrong with Nora. It's the visible edge of how a person is actually built. You've been handed a simpler story about yourself, that you are one self, and that self has either moved on or it hasn't. The real machinery has more parts than that, moving at different speeds, and once you can count them, what she's leaving stops looking like a mystery and starts looking almost inevitable. This is Axiom 12 of 75. From a system I built that reverse engineers how consciousness, identity, and the self actually operate. It isn't a motivational idea. It's a diagnostic, a tool for finding exactly where the trouble is on the days where every part of your life checks out fine and something still quietly drags. I call it the synchrony. The principle is this: you don't run on one track, you run on a few separate ones. The story you tell about your life, how that life actually feels day to day, and what you do with your hours. Any one of them can be working fine on its own and still be pulling against the others. Because a part being in order by itself and the parts being in order with each other are two completely different things. You can make real progress without all of them lined up. Decisions get better. Patterns shift. Things change on the outside. And whether that progress compounds or just demands you more and more to hold comes down to one thing: how much those parts are backing each other up instead of quietly working against each other. They fall out of step because the three parts were never built to keep time with each other. This story is the fast one. You can change your mind in an afternoon. Decide who you are now. And the whole picture reorganizes around the new line. How things feel moves slower, because the feeling isn't running on today's decision. It's running on years of momentum, and it doesn't update just because the story on top of it changed. And what you actually do moves slowest of all: your habits, your routines, the hundred small reflexes that make up a day were built to serve whoever you used to be. And they keep running that old program until you go in and redirect them one at a time. So after any real change, being out of step isn't the exception, it's the default. And it's quiet because each part, checked on its own, looks fine. The only place the trouble shows is in the gaps between them, where what one part is producing quietly contradicts another. And you feel it as drag without being able to point at the thing dragging. And the part that lags isn't always the same one. It depends of the person. For most people, it's the behavior that trails. They know what they want to be. They even feel it. And the old habits keep winning anyway. Nora is the other case. Her story caught up fine. The person she became, the life she built, the things she does every day, all of it locked into place. The one part that stayed behind was the feeling. And this is where the usual advice gets it exactly backwards. You'll be told the answer is to understand it. That once you see it clearly, name it, accept it, you're basically done. That noticing you've gone quiet about something is the same as being over it. It isn't. And the reason it isn't is the whole point of this axiom. The slow part doesn't run on understanding. It runs on its own clock. You can see the unfinished thing perfectly. Describe it in full. Decide out loud that it's behind you. And none of that moves it an inch. Because comprehension lives in the fast part, the story. The thing you are trying to move lives somewhere that doesn't take orders from the story. Knowing why you are stuck and actually being unstuck are two different events, and the gap between them can run for years. So keep one prediction ready. When the old light comes back, when that slow part of her finally gets a reason to move, which way do you think the catching up runs? You'd expect the slow part to finally hurry up. The old light comes back. The feeling that's been leaning toward it for years gets the one thing it was always missing: a reason to move. And you assume it climbs. She finally feels as settled as her life already looks. The old goodbye quietly catching up to the woman she became. That's the natural guess, but it's the incorrect one. It runs the other way. The slow part cannot be hurried. A rooted thing doesn't turn to face new light just because you've decided it should. So the parts that can move are the ones that do, and they move backward. The parts of her that made it all the way into her New York life start leaning toward the old goodbye instead. Everything falls back in line, and it does it the cheap way. The feeling was never going to be dragged forward into the life she built. So the life she built is the thing that gives. For years, there had been nothing in her to see. A woman who'd close every door behind her cleanly. And then that same door opened. It starts on Facebook. She's in her apartment one evening, going through all contacts with her mother, looking up people from back home. Almost offhand, she asks her mother for one name. Her mother struggles to remember, but then he gets it. Nora searches it, and his face comes up. She stalks a bit more, and under one of her father's old pages, there is a comment from him asking if anyone knew where she had gone. He'd been looking for her too. So she messages him, and he writes back within a day. The first video call is awkward. Neither of them knows what to say, and then they get going and don't stop. They talk about what they are doing now, then drift back to childhood, to the time she lost to him at something and cried about it for days. She tells him she cried like that after she emigrated too, and then quit because she figured out nobody was paying attention. Then the calls pile up, and you can see the ghost in her schedule. One night it's midnight in New York and morning for him in Korea. He says he has to get to class. She says she's about to have dinner. He stops.
나도 배고파. 저녁 먹어야 돼.
아직 안 먹었어?
아직.
지금 거기 몇 시인데?
밤 12시?
너 아직도 안 먹었어?
Neither of them wants to hang up. He says,
좀 말이 안 되는데 이런 말을 해도 되나 싶네.
She asks what?
뭐라고 하고 싶은데?
보고 싶었어.
나도.
They hung up smiling. Then we saw she took the time to draw a Korean keyboard by hand on a sheet of paper so she can type to him faster. A few days later, he catches her awake early.
안녕. 거기 아침 7시인가?
절대 아침 10시 전에 안 일어난다더니.
이 시간밖에 안 된다며.
She never gets up before 10. She's up at 7 for him. It keeps escalating. They talk about the future. She's going to an artist residency. He watches the movies she recommends. They both start asking the other to visit. On one call, he's in a cable car over a view of Korea and turns the camera so she can see it. She says she wishes she was there. He says they should come back together sometime. She says she misses him. The screen freezes on his face, and that's where it tips. She realizes she's ready to leave the city, her career, and the whole life she's built, and got on a plane. And she knows she cannot keep this up. And if the dynamic doesn't change, she needs to end it. On the next call, she's clearly not okay, and he sees it. She asks him when he could come to New York. He says a year and a half. There's an exchange program. That's the number that decides her. A year and a half of this. She tells him she cannot get to Seoul for at least a year either. And then she says it.
난 우리 잠깐 연락을 끊었으면 좋겠어.
He asks why. And she tells him.
난 이민을 2번이나 해서 뉴욕에 와 있어. 난 여기서 뭔가를 해내고 싶어. 여기에 있는 인생에 충실하고 싶은데 내가 맨날 서울 가는 비행기를 찾아보고 앉아 있는 거야.
He has nothing to say to that because it isn't about him. They try to keep it light. It's just a pause. They will talk soon.
그래. 잘 가라.
나중에 얘기하자.
그때 얘기해?
And this is worse than the goodbye they had on the steps at 12. Back then it was one word each, but they were children. Now they are grown. They have all the words, and they still can't find the right one. Now look at what actually moved. The midnight calls, the paper keyboard, getting up at 7. Those aren't 3 separate things. They are one thing. The parts of her that had fully arrived in New York are the parts that broke a step, and they broke it towards Seoul. The feeling never climbed up to meet the life she'd built. The life she had built started keeping the feelings ours. What she could do about it is the part that matters. She couldn't work on the feeling directly. That's the slow part, the one no decision reaches. And you already know it doesn't take orders. The one thing she could actually move was the cause, and the cause was the calls. So she ended them. Not to settle anything with him, not to finish the goodbye. She cut the calls so the parts that had broken a step could come back into line. She killed the signal. And that move worked. The life held exactly the way she meant it to. All of it stayed in line. And that was the right call. She had built something real and she protected it. And it cost her the thing she'd just gotten back. The goodbye once again didn't get finished. It got sealed up again, heavier this time, because now she was the one who closed it. The slow part went back to where it was, still leaning, still unfinished, a second goodbye stacked on the first. You've been part of one version of this. Not the exact context of Nora, but the move underneath it. At some point, there was something or someone you wanted badly enough that letting it run would have pulled your whole life out of line. And you made the same call she made. You cut it off. Not because it was wrong, but because keeping it would have cost you what you'd already built. And you were right, too. That's not what should have stayed with you. This is. Taking the thing away and being done with the thing are not the same move. And you've spent years treating them like they are. You defended your life against it. You didn't resolve it. It's still in there, exactly where you left it, waiting for a reason to move. And the day it gets won, you'll find out the trade you made never touched it. Why doesn't it just fade? You never feed it. You never go looking for it. Years go by with nothing pointing at it. And just like Nora, you can barely remember. And it stays there intact, waiting. Most things you starve that long die off. This one waits. That's the part worth understanding before we watch it finally get what it was waiting for. The reason it remains is in how the parts got built. They were never set to the same clock, so when one changes, the others owe it nothing and just keep running what they were built to run. And the drift always favors the oldest one. The part with the most years behind it has the deepest hold. The part that showed up most recently has the least. Live a life alone, and it doesn't settle toward the thing you decided most recently. It leans back toward whatever's been there longest. That's the slow part's entire advantage. It was first. The feeling still tilted toward that goodbye had a head start of a whole life on everything that came after it. Then there's a second reason. The one that keeps you from ever catching it. The success of everything else hides it. A life that full has no gap to point at. The one part still leaning toward the old goodbye doesn't register as unfinished business. It doesn't register as anything because there's no symptom on the surface for it to attach to. Everything you could actually look at is working. The working life is the cover. The stronger the rest of it gets, the better it buries the one part that never moved, which is exactly how someone ends up looking to everyone, including herself, like a woman who had let go of all of it cleanly. It finishes one way, and only one way, and it's neither one of the two ways you'd reach for. It doesn't finish by being understood, seeing the unfinished thing clearly, naming it, deciding out loud that it's behind you. None of that ever reached it. That was the whole point of the slow part. And it doesn't finish by being cut off either. Nora already ran that move. She ended the calls, and it never once reached the part that was still leaning. So if it cannot be taught to a finish and cannot be caught to a finish, what's left? Only the thing itself. The slow part is aimed at one specific event that never completed, and it stays aimed there until the exact event finally gets to happen in full. Not remembered, not decided. It has to actually reach its end, out in the open, for real. The feeling cannot be argued down to its close until the thing it's pointed at finishes. It keeps pointing. That's the part it's easy to get backwards about your own. The thing you decided years ago was behind you isn't waiting on a better decision. It's waiting on the actual event. On the day it gets to play all the way out instead of getting managed from across the room. You don't conclude these closed. They close when they finally get to happen, which for most of her life was the one thing that was never going to happen. The other half of that goodbye was a continent and a sealed decision away. And she'd built an entire life on the assumption it would stay there. And then, looking for the same thing, he buys a plane ticket to New York. For her whole life, the only thing that could finish that goodbye was the one part of it that could never happen. The other half of it living a continent away, behind a decision she'd sealed. You can't finish a goodbye with someone who isn't there. So it stayed open, and she built a life across the top of it. But now, he's on a plane. And here's what that does, which is not what you'd reach for first. By now, the two parts of her that run her actual days are locked solid. The story she tells about her life and the things she does with it aren't drifting anymore. They are the most settled they have ever been. So when the slow part finally gets its chance to move, it doesn't get to drag the rest of her life out of line. It cannot. The life is too set. The only direction left for that feeling to move is into a step with the life that's already there. One final thing to keep straight, because it's the easy thing to get wrong. That slow part was never only about him. The feeling that runs under a life is wide. It reaches everything that ever asks something of you. Every person and place and thing you cared for. The goodbye that never closed was one snagged spot in all of that. So when it finally clears, it isn't her picking him over the life she has. It's one stuck part of a much larger feeling letting go. So the whole of it can come into step with the life she is actually living. 12 years after she closed that laptop, they meet in a park in New York. They hug. They smile at each other. and neither of them has the faintest idea what to say, so they don't really say it. They just leave and go walk the city. They take the subway and end up in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, catching up the way anyone does. His girlfriend, who he's not with anymore. Her work, her marriage. She even takes a picture of him with the bridge behind him. Then they sit down across from a carousel, and she asks him the thing she actually wants to know.
근데 혜성아,
응.
너는 나를 왜 찾았어?
He tells her the truth, that he just wanted to see her one more time. That she'd left so suddenly that he kept thinking about her all the way through his military service. She says,
우리 그때 진짜 애기들이었잖아.
그리고 12년 전에 다시 만났을 때도 그때도 애기들이었지.
이제는 애기가 아니지.
then she goes home to her husband. He asks about him, how he's doing, whether he's good looking, and then, half as a joke and half not, whether she's planning to run off with him. She responds to this by reminding him who she is.
Definitely, I'm gonna throw away my life here and run away with him to Seoul. Do you even know me? I'm not gonna miss my rehearsals for some dude.
She means it, and she wants him to hear that as much as she wants to say it. The life she built isn't going anywhere. The next day they take the ferry and see the sights, and that same evening, he comes to the apartment and finally meets the husband. The two of them greet each other in broken pieces of each other's languages. After this, the three of them go out for pasta. They end up at a bar, and all three of them try to keep the husband in the conversation. But it keeps closing back down to the two of them. At one point, he's just there. And that's precisely where Hae-sung says the things he came to say. He tells her he can see how much her husband loves her, and that he didn't know liking her husband would hurt this much. He tells her that when they stopped talking, he missed her. That being here, standing in her actual life, makes him think about the other version.
12년 전에 그때 내가 만약에 뉴욕에 왔었다면 어땠을까? 만약에 네가 한국을 떠나지 않았다면 우리가 사귀었을까? 헤어졌을까? 부부가 됐을까? 우리는 아이들을 가졌을까? 그런 생각들.
And then he tells her what he realized.
넌 너기 때문에 떠나가야 했어. 그리고 내가 널 좋아한 이유는 네가 너이기 때문이야. 그리고 넌 누구냐면 떠나는 사람인 거야.
She answers him.
너가 기억하는 나영이는 여기에 존재하지 않아. 근데 그 어린애는 존재했어. 너 앞에 앉아있지는 않지만 그렇다고 없는 거는 아니야. 20년 전에 난 그 애를 너와 함께 두고 온 거야.
He says he knows, and that even at 12, he loved her. That's the conversation they never got to have. Not in the steps in Seoul, where it was one word each. Not on the call, where they were grown and had every word and still couldn't find the right one. Here, finally, They say all of it. They leave the bar, and now it's just the two of them on the sidewalk, waiting for his cab. They don't say anything. They stand and look at each other while the cab takes its time. And for a long minute, it's lining up to be the third one. Another goodbye nobody manages to finish. The same silence as the front steps and the screens. The taxi arrives. He hugs her, still without a word. He puts his bags in, and then he stops. He turns around and says,
야! 이것도 전생이라면 우리의 다음 생에서는 벌써 서로에게 다른 인연인 게 아닐까? 그때 우린 누굴까?
She says she doesn't know. And he says,
나도. 그때 보자.
She walks back to her husband, and she starts to cry. For 20 years that goodbye sat there with one word said and the rest swallowed. On the call it had gotten worse. Every word available, and not one of them the right one. This time they found them. Everything that didn't get said on this set of steps got said. The whole event running all the way to its end instead of getting cut short or kept at arm's length across an ocean. That's the only thing that was ever going to close it. It closed because it finally got to happen. And notice what made the happening safe. The life she'd built was real, stable, and was never under threat. None of it was ever actually in play. Which is exactly what let the feeling move at all. With the rest of her so set, the slow part had nowhere to pull. The friction was the goodbye that wouldn't close. Take that away and there's nothing left for the feeling to catch on, so it can finally, over time, fall into a step with the life she is living. That's the reason she cries at the end. She is not grieving a life she didn't choose. The feeling caught up. The one part of it that had been turned the wrong way for 20 years finally turned to face the rest. And the relief of that is the kind of thing that comes out as tears. Now the part that's yours, and it's the hard one. The thing you decided years ago was behind you isn't waiting on a better decision. It's waiting to happen. And most of yours are never going to get the plane ticket. The other person doesn't reappear on the sidewalk. The room you needed doesn't reassemble. The event you're quietly still aimed at is over and isn't coming back. Where does all of that leave you? The thing you're still quietly aimed at is gone. No one's walking back up to you on a sidewalk. The room you needed isn't going to reassemble itself. And that slow part hasn't moved an inch. The move is going to sound like less than you wanted. You don't get to finish the slow part. Not by deciding it's behind you. Not by force. Not by waiting for a version of the event that isn't coming. That layer doesn't take orders. You have watched that the whole way through. So the operation isn't aimed at the feeling at all. It's aimed at everything around it. You stop spending yourself on the one layer you cannot reach, and you put that effort where it actually has meaning. That's the whole shift. Not finishing the slow part, getting it to stop costing you everything else. The first step is to locate the layer that's out of step. First, you find which layer the drag actually lives in, and you get past the obvious answer, because the obvious answer is almost always wrong. The layer that aches is not necessarily the layer that's out of step. You feel it in the slow part, so you assume that's the thing to fix. It isn't. The problem is that one layer is keeping different time from the other two, and the work is to find which one, not the loudest one, the lagging one. Effort trends toward whatever you're already good at. That's why it's easy to miss. The person who's good with words keeps refining the story they tell about their life. The person who's good at doing things keeps rebuilding the routine. It feels productive the whole time, because real tools are landing on a real layer, just not the one that's behind. You can polish the story for a year and never once go near the place the problem is. You'll know you found the right layer by the cost. It's the one where the effort has been running heavier than it should for one reason you can name, where the work goes in and the returns keep coming back smaller than the work. Follow the spot where effort and result stop matching. It points straight at the layer keeping its own time. Step 2. Quit the two moves that never reach it. Then you stop running the two moves that were never going to reach it, and you have run both. The first is to decide it's behind you, to understand it, name it, announce that you're over it. The second is to cut off whatever steers it, end the calls, leave the room, put the thing that wakes it up out of reach. These two feel like resolution. Neither one is, and you already know why from watching Nora. Deciding it's closed is a move up in the story, and cutting off the cause only protects the rest of your life. Neither one ever reaches the slow part. You'll know you haven't running this because the thing keeps coming back unchanged every time you were sure you'd handle it. Handled is the tale. You don't handle a lagging layer. You either reach it or you don't, and neither of these does. Step 3. Redirect the effort to the layers that answer. Then comes the part where the actual lever is. Take the effort you haven't spending on the layer you cannot reach, the deciding, the cutting off, all that quiet management, and move it onto the two layers you can. The story you tell about your life and what you actually do with your days. Those take direction. They answer. Put the work there. This is the part that sounds like a consolation prize, and it isn't. When the two reachable layers are solid, when the life is genuinely built and genuinely yours, they do two things at once. They stop the lagging layer from dragging them out of line, which is most of what it was costing you in the first place. And they hold a shape for it to come into on the long timeline, if the thing it's aimed at ever does complete. You're not finishing the slow part. You're building the only conditions under which it could ever come back into line on its own, and in the meantime, getting your life back from it, which is the half you actually control. The marker is the cleanest of the three. Effort starts matching the return again. The heaviness that had no name reduces. Not because the slow part resolved, but because you stopped paying its tax with everything else you've got. That's the operation, and notice what it is and what it isn't. It is not a way to finish the thing you never closed. Nothing in here finishes that. It's the move that takes the thing you never closed and stops it from quietly running the rest of your life. Skip it, and you will keep mistaking management for resolution. Every time you decide it's behind you, every time you cut off whatever stirred it, you file it under done, and it comes back under the same name. The lagging layer stays exactly where you left it, and you go on paying for it with the layers you could have protected. The story and the days is slowly giving way to the one part of you that won't, until the heaviness stops looking like a problem you could solve and starts looking like just the weather. The cost of being you. It's a layer out of step, and now you know which moves reach it and which ones never will. So quick version, because I know it's a lot. You run on a few layers that keep different time. The story you tell, how life feels, what you actually do. And after a real change, the slowest one falls behind, and no decision reaches it. That lag is the drag you could never name. You don't fix it by forcing it. You fix it by taking your effort off the layer that won't answer and putting it back on the ones that will. That's the whole thing. This is just one axiom. One out of 75 that make up the system I've been building. Each one a specific piece of the same machinery. Each one a different layer of how a person actually runs underneath. This was the one about the layers keeping different time. There are 74 more. And one of those others might be the one you need first. Because sometimes it isn't a slower layer at all. It's two pulls. You decide something, and then you quietly catch yourself walking it back, like part of you never signed off. That has its own fix, and I broke it down in the video on the bear. If what you are fighting keeps reversing the moment you commit, start there. Finally, if this explains something, subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching.